See this a lot with my clients where you have a table and then you have bullets that explain that table. But very rarely do you take a look at the table and say, is this table necessary? So with this table right now, you are looking at 2021 and 2022. But we have 2020 here as a column, but we're not commenting on that at all. So if we're not going to talk about it, it should just be removed. You also oftentimes will see things that have either no data or it is very little data that isn't even like talked about. That probably doesn't need to be there. Unless it's part of the story, unless it's what you're going to be talking about, then it just needs to be removed. If this is something that you're going to be mentioning later, then you can always add it in the next section of the presentation. But when it comes to these bullets here, this isn't really helping your audience process the information. You actually just have this now twice for them to process the same information, and then you're going to speak to them and they're going to read the slides, so they're actually processing it more than they need to, and it's going to lead to cognitive overload. So one thing that you can do is you can take this and put those bullets in the notes tab down below. That can make it easy for you to remember what you want to talk about, but the audience can then see the table by itself and you can highlight what's important. So here, if we're going to talk about new signups, you can highlight it in some type of color. This is PowerPoint standard color palette, which isn't great, but just working with what everybody has when you first open PowerPoint, it would be something like this, right? And then you can bring in whatever that means. So the 55% increase then adds more meaning than just raw numbers alone. Is that what you were expecting? Is that better? Is it worse? What does that compare to in other formats, right? Talk about that. And then as you talk about other sections, you can highlight the rest of the table as you're talking about it, and then bring in information. So here, if I want to talk about how 320 is nearly the same amount as the signups that we had last year, that's a pretty impressive amount. So I could bring that in and kind of comment on it and talk about that. However, a table is never going to be as effective as some type of data visualization. So oftentimes people use pie charts, and we know that people struggle with processing pie charts. The problem with pie charts is that every single pie is going to be 100%. So if you're going to compare 2021 to 2022, both pies are going to be 100%, and I can't really compare what that growth is. Whereas up here, I see that this growth is actually really substantial. So one way that you can do that is by using a clustered columns or cluster bar chart. And this allows you to see, oh, this is actually a really big difference right here. And I could highlight this with a graphic with whatever percentage that increase was. The other thing is that the audience can then see, oh, blue to blue, this is the increase, orange to orange, so on and so forth. They can also visually see that this green section is nearly as big as this orange section from last year. And so that's a pretty big increase that they can see, that just by adding this other revenue of email list growth, that they were able to nearly double what they did last year. So just some things to think about in terms of when you're presenting the information. Try and move away from tables unless that table is the only way to show the information, which oftentimes it isn't, and or if the table is really, really simple. So it's just one column or one row with a couple going across. And you want it to be that it's adding value to your audience and not that it makes it easier for you to present the information. Think about what your audience needs, try and remove that cognitive overload and make it easier for them to process by adding visuals like this. Hope that helps. Reach out if you have any questions.